Good evening to you all. Welcome to ETV News. I'm Grum Tariku. We have breaking news. The gallant National Ethiopian Defense Forces and the Amhara Fano Special Force and Militia have just controlled Sekota town, capital of the Wag Himra zone. While TPLF forces are in total disarray following the lightning wave of counteroffensive by the Allied forces, nearly all of Wag Himra zone has now been freed from the yoke of months of grip by the terrorist TPLF. During the final showdown to recapture Sekota town, the patriotic people of Wag Himra fought tooth and nail with the remnants of TPLF fighters aiding the Allied Ethiopian army. Now that the TPLF army is disjointed and on the run, the gallant Ethiopian army is clearing up the remaining adjacent areas while advancing to Abergalle. Meanwhile, the Allied Ethiopian army has snatched away Mujja and Tumuga both at Kobo front from the retreating TPLF army and marching to Alamata town. The army is also advancing to Marawa and Koram from their fresh capture of Takulash. The remaining TPLF army is now choked and wailing for help from the international community and its terrorist leaders up in Tigray who are busy spreading lies. The gallant National Ethiopian Defense Forces and the Amhara Fano Special Force and Militia have just controlled Sekota town, capital of the Wag Himra zone. While TPLF forces are in total disarray following the lightning wave of counteroffensive by the Allied forces, nearly all of Wag Himra zone has now been freed from the yoke of months of grip by the terrorist TPLF. During the final showdown to recapture Sekota town, the patriotic people of Wag Himra fought tooth and nail with the remnants of TPLF fighters aiding the Allied Ethiopian army. Now that TPLF army is disjointed and on the run, the gallant Ethiopian army is clearing up the remaining adjacent areas while advancing to Abergalle. Meanwhile, the Allied Ethiopian army has snatched away Mujja and Tumuga, both at the Kobo front, from the retreating TPLF army and marching to Alamata town. The army is also advancing to Marawa and Koram from their fresh capture of Takulash. The remaining TPLF army is now choked and waiting for help from the international community and its terrorist leaders up in Tigray who are busy spreading lies. Gallant National Defense Forces and the Amhara Fano Special Force and Militia have just controlled Sekota town, capital of the Wag Himra zone. While TPLF forces are in total disarray following the lightning wave of counteroffensive by the Allied forces, nearly all of Wag Himra zone has now been freed from the yoke of months of grip by the terrorist TPLF. During the final showdown to recapture Sekota town, the patriotic people of Wag Himra fought tooth and nail with the remnants of TPLF fighters aiding the Allied Ethiopian army. Now the TPLF army is disjointed and on the run, the gallant Ethiopian army is clearing up the remaining adjacent areas while advancing to Abergalle. Meanwhile, the Allied Ethiopian army has snatched away Mujja and Tumuga, both at the Kobo front, from the retreating TPLF army and marching to Alamata town. The army is also advancing to Marawa and Koram from their fresh capture of Takulash. The remaining TPLF army is now choked and waiting for help from the international community and its terrorist leaders up in Tigray, who are busy spreading lies. Meanwhile, State Minister of Foreign Affairs Redwan Hussein said the establishment of an international commission of experts on Ethiopia by the UN Human Rights Commission is unacceptable. Briefing ambassadors stationed in Addis Ababa about the current situation in Ethiopia, Redwan underscored that the convening of a special session of the UN Human Rights Council and establishment of an international commission of experts on Ethiopia are politically motivated. He said the proposal is unacceptable, adding Ethiopia will not cooperate with the set-up mechanism.
I would like to make it clear for everybody that to ensure the sovereign integrity of the country is a prerogative of the federal government. But again, the issue that is being raised by the domestic politics, that what we used to also try to let our partners understand is, once the government last time decided to cease fire and pull out from Tigray, then it let TPLF to come all the way to near to Addis and devastate all livelihoods. Now Ethiopian people do not want that to happen again. Otherwise, this government would not be considered as a government. It was simply considered as a government who cahootly operates with TPLF to destroy this country. Still, some operators from diaspora and intelligentsia are raising that question. If we let this TPLF to get away from all its crimes before it's crushed in its entirety, then there's always a recipe for TPLF and the appetite for TPLF to come back and attack neighboring regions and to claim all its heinous crimes. So are we going to allow that to happen, or how the government would make sure that TPLF will not have that leverage, that access to arms to ransack this country again? So there is a dilemma.
The decision undermines the principles of solidarity, since Ethiopia is cooperating with relevant human rights mechanisms besides having an effective human rights mechanism in the country, he said. He said the decision unduly politicizes the Council, disregard Ethiopia's commitment to take measures according to the joint recommendation.
So we still seek our partners to understand, not to make reckless mistakes, and to get some calmness, and to join hands for all of us to bring those culprits to justice. If there is somebody allegedly suspected for wrongdoing in the government of Ethiopia, so be it. So TPLF must also relinquish its grip, its greed, and also may be ready to hand over its gang of criminals among itself, and so that the rest could have some kind of a leeway to live a peaceful life. Still, we are talking about few hundreds. Those hundreds of thousands of people who were corralled and pushed by TPLF, they are just innocent Ethiopians.
It would have been logical had the Council decided to launch a joint UN Ethiopian Human Rights Commission investigation on human rights abuses perpetrated by the TPLF in the Amhara and Afar regions, he added. The Government Communications Service disclosed that the process for the national dialogue should not be mistaken as a preparation to negotiate with the terrorist TPLF group. The remark came here today when State Minister of Government Communications Service, Kabare Dasisa, briefed journalists on the current developments. National dialogue is one of the commitments that had been made by the government before the terrorist TPLF waged the war against the nation. The undergoing process for the national dialogue is aimed to ensure the national consensus in line with reinforcing nation building, he said. Take a listen.
ምክክር በአንዳንድ ወገኖች የታሰበው ከወቅታዊ ሁኔታ ጋር በማያያዝ
Some parties want to paint a picture of the government negotiating with the terrorist TPLF group. However, this is completely absurd. The very objective of the dialogue is to bring sustainable peace in a country. It is also meant to boost the nation-building process. Negotiation has been a nagging question for long and not at all a new idea. Preparations are underway to start the process. Right now, it's on the preparation stage. We didn't bring this up just because we're fighting the terrorists. It has nothing to do with them. It was to hold an inclusive dialogue with all concerned bodies and to reach consensus on the major national issues of the country.
The minister also expressed that TPLF is busy trying to deflect the public away from its defeat by spreading all sorts of rumor. The TPLF is telling the world that it has willingly withdrawn its forces, whereas in reality it has sustained total loss.
ሰዓታትና ርቀት ቀርቶኛል ብሎ ሲፎክር የነበረው አሸባሪ ቡድን
The terrorist TPLF group, which until early December was bragging about its march to Addis Ababa, was forced to flee for dear life in all fronts. It wants to mislead the people of Tigray and the rest of the world by spreading lies that it withdrew for peace.
Well, I am now joined by Ambassador Dina Mufti, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, over the phone to shed some light on the issues. Good evening, Ambassador. Good evening, Ambassador. Can you hear me, Ambassador? Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining me, Ambassador Dina Mufti.
Yes, good. Thank you also for having me.
Okay, Ethiopia has just made it clear that convening on a special session of the UN Human Rights Council and establishment of an international commission of experts on Ethiopia are politically motivated. It has thus unequivocally expressed unwillingness to cooperate in any endeavor in this regard. So where is this thing going to lead as far as the Council's special commission is concerned?
Well, basically, this is an event that clearly has demonstrated that the mission of the Council this time around is quite political. It's irrelevant to what is happening on the ground, because there had been previous investigation of the situation by the same body, together with the pertinent body from Ethiopian side. While it will be appropriate for them to call for an investigation into the newly violated areas of the Amhara and Afar regions and the new atrocities and violations in these regions, it will be simply a duplication of an effort to talk about another investigation in the previous situations in the areas that have been investigated. Why do they investigating what they are aspiring, what they are planning to investigate for things that has been already investigated? It doesn't make sense.
Okay, one final question, Ambassador. The world has watched the letter to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres by leader of the terrorist TPLF group, Debretsion Gebremichael. The leader is asking his partners in the West to help him with no-fly zone curfew in Tigray. And also the leader is clearly trespassing the constitution in the sense that a regional state cannot communicate with foreign bodies on its own. What's your take on this?
Well, they have been violating the national constitution, the federal constitution, for some times. They have continued doing the same thing. It's not new. This is an expression of the frustrations and the desperate attempt on the part of this group, in fact, to ask for the salvation from the international community. This is an expression of the desperate act. This is simply a frustration by the group, and they're on the losing end.
Okay, Ambassador Dina Mufti, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, thank you very, very much for your time.
You are welcome. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
So having the diaspora.
Ethiopia has been imaged differently from the reality.
Out of U.S. policy change towards...
The real reasons they wanted to maintain the blockade is that they wanted
And also some pressure is on the Ethiopian government, and they are just taking the domestic issue to the international arenas like the UN and...
What's the picture you have about the Ethiopian diaspora? Nowadays it seems that their beauty is blossoming.
The suspension of Ethiopia from AGOA isn't likely to have a serious impact.
You are watching ETV News. Bent on vandalizing and destroying public properties, the terrorist TPLF destroyed and looted Qobo Hospital during its stay in the town up north in the state of Amhara. The TPLF inflicted damage on the health facility, plundering as much of the equipment as they could and transported all the way to Tigray while they vandalized the rest. Johannes Fantana has the rest of the story.
Terrorist group completely destroyed the Qobo hospital, which was serving the people of Raya Qobo and the surrounding area. The group also looted the hospital's property.
This facility was only built recently, unlike other hospitals and health facilities in the area. We were all shocked by the unparalleled magnitude of atrocities perpetrated by this group around here.
The terrorist squads completely destroyed patient information and other documents while damaging treatment beds and various medical supplies. Other equipments were looted.
The terrorist army has inflicted a total destruction on the health facility. Doors were torn through while windows were shattered. The army ransacked the facility, taking away various machines while damaging those it couldn't loot away. Although reputed for its better supply of medicine, the hospital is almost empty now.
The invading Tigrayan army of the TPLF tried all it could to fool people into thinking that it had no enmity with the people of invaded towns. But its targeting of public property is testimony for its deep-seated hatred for the Amhara.
They looted and destroyed government institutions and private homes. To be honest, they were committing atrocities that we believe even the devil is incapable of. The group, which is plagued by hatred of Amhara and Ethiopia, massacred more than 600 residents here. But thanks to the relentless counteroffensives taken by the Allied army, the group is in total disarray and on the run.
Targeting health facilities and other institutions meant to serve the people constitutes a war crime. Even though some Westerners prefer silence, the militants of the terrorist group massacred the innocent, raped women, and they looted and destroyed health and education and other public facilities.
Ethiopian Islamic Affairs Supreme Council has called on the international community to support internally displaced people in Ethiopia. President of the Islamic Affairs Supreme Council, Grand Mufti Haji Omar Idris, has given press briefing to local and international media on current affairs in Ethiopia. Grand Mufti Haji Omar Idris recalled that religious leaders had exerted various efforts to prevent the war from happening through mediation and reconciliation. The president explained that the conflict has resulted in significant loss of lives and destruction of religious institutions and many other private and public properties. The Ethiopian Islamic Affairs Supreme Council has been conducting a survey to identify extent of destruction caused by the conflict.
And as an African, when you see a country like Ethiopia under attack, then you should join in to support, because this is history simply repeating itself. What do I mean? Have you ever wondered why most African flags use the red, yellow, and green colors? Well, it was actually the Ethiopian flag that inspired the flags of many African countries like Ghana, Guinea, Cameroon, Mali, Senegal, Togo, Comoros, Burkina Faso, Seychelles, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, Congo, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Mauritania, Benin. Personally, as an African history enthusiast, I always refer to Ethiopia as the African whistleblower, because it was Ethiopians defeating Italians that was one of the main triggers of World War II. It was also Ethiopia's resistance against foreign occupation that inspired a lot of African countries to fight for their own independence. Even the Pan-African color scheme developed by Marcus Garvey was inspired by the Ethiopian zeal.
Ethiopia is really standing on its own in terms of progress. They attack Ethiopia because they want to attack the Belt and Road Initiative. They don't want the Belt and Road Initiative to flourish, because if it does, it means Africa will change. It will change into a completely new paradigm.
A lot of African countries still draw strength and have always drawn strength from Ethiopia. And so when you see Ethiopia under attack, then know that the entire African continent is under attack.
TPLF vandalizing of health facilities and looting of blood banks in the Amhara and Afar states are vicious attacks on humanity and parts of crooked plans to disadvantage the people in both regions. The founding member of Global Aid Ethiopia, Sharon Ashton, made this remark during an exclusive interview with ETV English here today. Shifara Lakoha has interviewed her. Take a look.
Ethiopians and Friends of Ethiopia in the United States of America and Canada have held a fundraising event to help Ethiopia rebuild and refund medical destructions by the terrorist organizations, as you are well informed, well aware of. So let's first talk about the fundraising event, since you were also part of this great cause.
We saw the participation of many partner organizations in this effort. And I think that's what we have to do to leverage up the amount of money that's needed to rebuild Ethiopia. You know, This is just the health sector, where we've seen over 2,700 health facilities destroyed, 4 blood banks in the north destroyed, something like 150 ambulances burned and destroyed, everything looted. So it's a tremendous effort in the health sector. And next we will see the rebuilding plan for areas like the Ministry of Education, where there's millions of students out of class and schools destroyed in the north. So we all need to come together with a very large plan, a holistic plan, coordinated, to help leverage up the resources, skills of everyone that's involved in rebuilding Ethiopia.
As you know, the terrorist TPLF has destroyed health facilities wherever it went, especially in Amhara and Afar regions. Destruction of these costly health facilities in a country, struggling to meet ends meet to provide health facilities across the country. What are some of your observations of such a brutal act, if you will?
Well, health is a basic, fundamental right of everyone. And so this is a vicious attack on humanity. And it's also another way to marginalize, disadvantage, and destroy communities in Amhara and Afar that may have already been struggling because of, poverty in those areas. And, the looting of drugs, destruction of the equipment, destruction of the blood bank. It's just unbelievable that humans would do this to their brothers and sisters in the same country. And somehow we have to get over this and be able to come together as one Ethiopia and manage to rebuild with pride so that this never happens again.
Now that war on TPLF is entering a final stage, scholars are mulling over the implication for power relations in the strategic Horn of Africa region. Ethiopia's 13 months long, highly volatile conflict increasingly driving regional and great powers in ways which may yet undermine U.S. Western position in the region, according to analysts. Take a look at the following reportage by Tigist Sarnesa.
Ethiopia's government had by the second week of December 2021 essentially turned the tide in the conflict initiated by the terrorist TPLF. The group, now in total disarray and confined to the northmost and war-ravaged Tigray, still relies on the West for means of amassing firepower, funds and foreign support to pressure Ethiopia.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the United Nations has no political agenda in Ethiopia. Our agenda is just one. Our agenda is just one.
ካሜራ ያየ ነው ግን ካሜራ ያየ ነው ፎቶ እየተነሳ ካሜራ ያነሳሉ ከውስጥ ሆኖ ድራማ ነው በቃ ድራማ እየተሰራ ነው Seriously?
The State Department is ordering U.S. citizens and non-essential embassy staff to leave Ethiopia.
Denmark and Italy have also asked their citizens in Ethiopia to leave while commercial flights were still available in the country.
He said the State Department has now updated the travel advisory for Ethiopia to level 4.
What that means is we are advising U.S. citizens do not travel to Ethiopia. We are recommending that U.S. citizens in Ethiopia consider departing now using commercial options that remain available.
Addis Ababa faces the challenges of rebuilding those parts of Ethiopia ravaged by the TPLF and its allies over the past year. This it must do without any Western momentum towards providing true reconstruction aid, bearing in mind the constant Washington mantra that the TPLF was a victim and the areas ravaged by the terrorist TPLF were somehow the perpetrators. The information dominance campaign may have left a world with little interest in rebuilding Ethiopia, had it not been for the ascendance of Pan-Africanism thanks to the spread of the #NoMore movement across the globe. The new U.S. Joe Biden administration policy led by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken took a huge risk for no apparent reason to back the TPLF and to attempt to isolate and topple the Ethiopian government of Prime Minister Abiy. This would have guaranteed the breakup of Ethiopia and presumably have reinforced Egyptian control over the Suez Canal and Red Sea trade links.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others, One is to run secret wars. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA.
The scale of TPLF atrocities, at first blamed by the TPLF's international information warfare campaign on the Ethiopian government itself, is now being exposed, and now with that, the opportunity is waning for the US State Department to continue its support to the TPLF. Can, however, Secretary Blinken step back from his patronage of the TPLF, given the strong relationship which his team has had with the TPLF since the former Marxist group actually controlled the Ethiopian government for nearly 3 decades? The approach taken by the Blinken team mirrors its approach during 2 earlier Democratic Party administrations under President Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. So there's a possibility that Secretary Blinken could double down on his support for the breakup of Ethiopia, with the result that the US find itself isolated for decades from influence in the region. Even though the West continues to serve the entire nation with impartiality, its actions were louder in exposing their support to the terrorist TPLF in the case of Ethiopia. Power relations have now shifted, with actors from the opposite camp like China and Russia have entered the scene. The rivalry means the US dominance in Red Sea and Horn of Africa must wane, now that the other camp has flexed enough muscles to ward off any influence by the US. For Africans, though, it means equipment to boost the spirit of Pan-Africanism reawakened recently in solidarity with Ethiopia and work for a win-win approach.
You see, the EU realizes individual little countries, they can't survive on the world stage. So they come together as the European Union. Now picture this now. So they cut up this Africa into the tiny little countries, small economies that could never survive on their own, but gave them the same sovereignty as the big boys. So that way, when the little bitty countries go to the world stage for the purposes of development and discussing trade, they're wannabe boxers who are being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring every day.
Scholars say some Western forces are lobbying for the relocation of conferences destined to be held in Addis Ababa because of Ethiopia's resistance to foreign meddling in its internal matters. Part of the solution to the issue, they say, is that Africans need to stand together as true children of Adwa and with the spirit of Pan-Africanism. Jerusalem Betsa reports.
In the past 2 decades, Ethiopia has been the stage when the two superpowers competing in the Horn of Africa. Particularly, the US has been putting its pressure on Ethiopia's internal matter in different regimes, including in the TPLF regime. This has cost Ethiopia much, historians said.
We know how we paid during the last 27 years. The policies, they give you aid, they interfere in the affairs of your state. They say SAP, structural adjustment program, make this, make that, change this policy and the like. Those policies do have their own negative impacts on each and every citizen of the nation. Therefore, we tested that severe operation during the last 27 years.
But now, when the Ethiopian government begins to resist their interference, they have been trying to put their pressure against Ethiopia in different ways. Currently, some corners are lobbying for relocating conference destined to be held in Addis Ababa, which is a good testimony for that. Talking to ETV, scholars said that this is the US and its allies' intention against Ethiopia to diminish its political and economic power.
They try to put Ethiopia, it's an attempt to put Ethiopia in quagmire. That means, if there are diplomatic offices, international organizations here, it is beneficial to Ethiopia, to its economy, to its influence, to different activities. Many foreign investors come, contribute to the development of the country. Shifting the offices of these international diplomatic offices would mean is to paralyze the economy of Ethiopia and then to make Ethiopia poor, because Ethiopia resisted foreign influence, foreign interventions in the affairs of our nations.
The issue of moving African Union headquarters can be, for them, from their perspective, can be an instrument to disempower Ethiopia, not only economically, but also politically and socially. Ethiopia, because of historical reason, is seen by African brothers and sisters as a role model, as a sign of resilience, sovereignty, and freedom.
The heart of the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, also known as the capital city of Africa, due to its historical, diplomatic, and political significance for the continent. That's why the African Union headquarters, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and other international institutions choose Addis, the scholar said.
Why Ethiopia? The only independent black country in the world, never colonized. That's the reason why when the Organization of African Unity, way back in May 1963, was established, that's where unanimously African brothers and sisters said Ethiopia is the rightful place to hold that. Second, why? Because of Ethiopia's contributions in the fight against colonialism and neocolonialism, and Ethiopia's active role in Pan-Africanism. Third, it's a peaceful country. Literally, Addis, compared to other cities, is very peaceful.
Solidarity among Africans as one with the spirit of Pan-Africanism is significant to withstand such kind of Western powers' interest on Africa.
We have to revive the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And I think, fortunately, Ethiopians in the country, in the diaspora, are already active in this regard. We know the No More movement started with Ethiopians, supported with Eritreans, now supported by all Africans and even Asians and so on. We need to work on that. And that will help us to make sure that they will not succeed.
This is a clear sign of American negative attitude towards our nation, because we resisted as the children of Adwa. We should do that also, of course. We should resist foreign imposition, foreign influence in our internal affair. Africans should stood firmly by the side of Ethiopia, because the Western power see Ethiopia as a symbol.
I don't think so. They will succeed. The majority of Africans, it's their right to float this wrong idea. But when it comes to decision, it has to be decided in protocol-wise. All members should gather together and decide. That will not happen. This is regarding African unity. Regarding United Nations specialized agencies, anything goes. The United Nations is being put under pressure now. Ethiopia is also under pressure now. I wouldn't be surprised if some agencies of the UN report back negatively, and if they want to close. It's their choice. It's their choice. I don't think they will do it.
Addis Ababa, which is called New Flower in Amharic language, is preparing to receive and to provide standard service for the coming 1 million Ethiopians in the diaspora and Ethiopian friends to celebrate Christmas with other Ethiopian cities and towns.